Alrighty, so yeah, the cloud in a more practical way. Let's see. We prepped a couple of topics for this session conversation, and one of them is what defines like an PC/workstation performance, specifically in cloud. And of course, today we talked about like GPUs and remoting protocols and things like that. But it's not that that's like the engine of a plane or the engine of a car or whatever the engine fits in, right? But when you look at that complete pictures too, so storage and latency, storage and IOPS, CPU cores, CPU clock speed, the amount of RAM, the GPU speed, and the family, the family of the GPU, the amount of RAM of the GPU. For us, this is not rocket science. Everyone who is in the EUC, VDI, server-based computing, terminal services, remote desktop services, session host, MetaFrame, XenApp, presentation server, apps and desktop, whatever it is, this is like not rocket science. But what I find interesting, almost on a weekly basis, I get questions around this topic in the context of public cloud, because many of sometimes my colleagues, but sometimes customers as well, they think, well, now I swipe the credit card or I pay XYZ a month for Azure, Google, Amazon resources, and I expect like a cloud like a workstation type performant machine, because that's what I need. And you will be surprised how often I get the feedback, hey, this machine performs much slower than what I expect to be compared to my 3-year-old, 5-year-old workstation under my desk. And then I ask, hey, what is under your desk? Well, I have a bunch of SSDs in my machine. I have a 3+ something gigahertz CPU in my machine. Maybe not 12 cores or 16 cores, but maybe like 8 cores or 10 cores, whatever. But the clock speed is much higher. These kind of things is what I hear and see a lot. And I would like to share a little bit about that topic in the context of cloud in a practical way, because you need to look at these elements as well when you think about cloud. On one side, the cloud is great. If I would like to spin up 3,000 machines in Sydney or 1,500 machines in West US on Azure or Google or Amazon or even AliCloud, I can do that. So that's the beauty of cloud. And if that applies, if that connects to the workload you have in mind, if that connects to the use case you have in mind, that's a great thing. But the flexibility to pick and choose the machine you normally can configure when you go to the HPE website or the Cisco website, that's not so simple in public cloud. You cannot say, I want to have this CPU with this clock speed and this amount of cores and this storage with these kind of characteristics. It doesn't work like that. And I want to show you in the next example.
Yeah, let me give you some background information, because Ruben and I were sitting together last night because I arrived here in the Netherlands last night, and we had a great barbecue. And while we were sitting there around the fire, we started having this conversation, and Ruben told me the story, and I said, okay, now we need evidence. Please show me the configuration pages. And actually, this is what he did this morning. So he created this slide deck earlier this morning.
Yep. So this is not this machine. So this D8S V3 is not a GPU machine. But the point is, this is more like around storage. In Azure, you have different storage types we can use for end user computing. You have standard storage, standard SSD, premium SSD. These are the 3 main ones. And you have 2 other storage types more towards like SAP type workloads.
And these are exactly the recommended machines by Microsoft when it comes to Windows Virtual Desktop. So this machine doesn't come out of the blue. It's the recommended machine.
So from a storage perspective, my advice is skip standard storage. Standard storage means 500 IOPS per disk, and latency can be quote everything. It's not like fixed. So it can be like pretty bad as well. That's standard storage. Don't go that route. In the early days of the NV6 machines, standard storage was the only disk type you could use on Azure. Nowadays, you can use also standard SSD, which is much better, but don't be fooled by the name SSD in that name standard SSD. The amount of IOPS per disk is still 500, which is not SSD performance normally you see on your laptop as an example. But latency is much lower, which is and also constant, like stable, which is a very good thing. But this example is a good example. So this is nothing special here. Go to portal.azure.com and select this D8S v3, and you will see that this machine will have like 12,800 IOPS, which is great. It's like a decent number when you have a machine like that with this kind of IOPS. Nothing wrong with that. But if you configure this machine like we did this morning, or like I did this morning, I use premium SSD. So I'm not using standard storage. I'm not using standard SSD. I use the more expensive premium SSD option for this machine. And look what happens here. If I select premium SSD, the size in this case is 1 terabyte, like 1023 gigabytes. And now you see it dropped to 500 IOPS. That's interesting. But I don't need 1 terabyte for my RDSH VDI machine. I only want 100 gig or maybe 200 gig. And you see if I change from 100 that the IOP and also the throughput will drop. That's how the platform is designed. It's tough. I don't share. There's no webcam to share, but it's like a line. When you add more capacity, the performance and the IOPS and the throughput also will increase. And that's an interesting one because sometimes you don't need 1 terabyte for a VDI machine for your persistent machine. Maybe you want to have 100 gig or 200 gig or maybe 400 gig, like smaller sizes, or maybe even smaller than 100 gig. In a non-persistent pooled environment, I don't need 100 gig for my Delta. Things like that is interesting to keep in mind. So storage and public cloud, right now I picked up Azure. Different vendors have different approaches, but this is many customers of ours, like in our industry, are really focused on Azure. And that's a good thing. Azure is a solid platform, nothing wrong with that. But be aware of this scenario, like the storage angle.
Just to bring that into perspective, the SSD on my laptop has 100,000 IOPS, and I'm alone on my laptop. Now that gives you an idea of what kind of limitation it is if you only have 500 IOPS in an Azure VM, and maybe it's a multi-user VM. So all these users share the 500 IOPS, while on my laptop I have 100,000. So that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. And in my earlier session this morning, I also talked about CPU clock speed. If you didn't see that session or hear that session, it will be online. So CPU clock speed is also a huge factor in performance, and especially with single-threaded applications. So keep that in mind. Let's switch topics a little bit. One of my clients was using NV6. He was okay with that. He is also using NV24, so a much beefier machine with much more RAM. But he would like to use a more modern GPU for number crunching. He had a couple of applications to calculate all kinds of bridges and strengthen in bridges and things like that. And that application can leverage specific functions in the NVIDIA GPU. So he was not happy at all with the Maxwell GPU. His feedback was, well, this is like a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, whatever, like 4-year-old GPU. I have P series in my workstation that performs much, much better than this Azure machine. But I would like to use Azure because I'm a project-driven organization. I would like to use 800 machines for just 3 weeks and then done. So he would like to use Azure. So my challenge is like there is no NV6 with an Pascal or an Turing or a Volta type machine, but there are NC6 machines. So this NC6 v3 has a V100 NVIDIA GPU in. So what I did, I spin up that machine in Azure. That machine is of course much more expensive. It has a V100 GPU, as you can see on the device manager. RAM is 112 gigs, all good, but he was really focused on the GPU. So you could say, well, I could draw mode in. Yes, I can. But when I run SpecView Perf, the performance was not so good. Why is that? Because there is no license, like no NVIDIA license attached to that GPU. Because default, that machine is designed for machine learning and deep learning, and you don't need a Quadro Virtual Data Center workstation license for that. So what I understand, and it's something on my to-do list to fix and to find out, what I can do is add a license, like an NVIDIA license server to this machine, or to connect that to this machine, and then I'm licensed, and that should unlock the Quadro elements which this application will use. The big challenge I have, besides of setting up license server and all that kind of hassle, but that's a different conversation. Sorry, Jits.
Jits just entered the room, so we have NVIDIA in our studio room now. So maybe Jits wants to contribute.
This customer would like to use hundreds of machines for just a couple of weeks. So they don't want to buy a license. They want to rent a license for XYZ hours or maybe XYZ days or weeks. And that's not available. It's not available yet. More comments yet?
Today you can, and we discussed it earlier today, and on our public website, if you go to docs.nvidia.com/grid/cloud-service-support, and we'll make sure.
Oh my God!
Yeah, you can see indeed the.
It's bring your own license.
Yeah, it's a bring your own license. So that doesn't really is a good fit for a cloud approach, and this is something that we'll definitely be fixing.
Good.
In the future. Yeah, especially for these kind of use cases.
Yeah, this is what you need in like in a flexible cloud model, not like a data center on-prem license in this context. So this is what that's a summary of this slide. Like final thoughts is around this one: service limits. Everyone in cloud space, like public cloud space, if I ask, hey, what does service limits means? And if you are not sure, this is an extreme important thing. Service limits are introduced by every cloud vendor to protect us, so that I cannot spin up 1,000 NC6 v3s in West Europe like instantly and do a sort of denial of service attack on my credit card. That's what protecting me, but it's also helping Microsoft and Google and Amazon and AliCloud to get insights about the capacity they need to bring into their data center. So capacity planning is also part of that. So service limits apply to IP addresses and certain instance type families. And you start with like a number. Maybe your MSDN contract starts with like 5 NV6 machines. And if you want to spin up more, then you need to file a support ticket. Overall, that's pretty fast, so no worries here. But keep in mind that service limits are something to check, double check every time when you increase capacity or you have like a DR setup. Or like in a frame context, I can, when I publish my production pool, like a non-persistent production pool, we do a rolling update, and that we create a shadow pool in parallel of that. That shadow pool, in worst case scenarios, will be doubling the service limits, like double the IP addresses or double the instance types. And if your contract doesn't support that, then things will not work. And you want to have feedback in your Azure portal or feedback in like the Citrix portal or feedback in the Nutanix Frame portal to get insights like, hey, service limits are reached. So service limits are an important element, besides of like API request limits and things like that.
So maybe Christian, Gabe, and I should put on our Microsoft hat and respond to that. In reality, all three of us are contractors with Microsoft right now. And I personally end up in many sort of meetings with large customers where we're debating exactly that. So one of the limitations that you run into is, like you said, you want to spin up many machines. And I'm talking to customers that have more than 100,000 users. And as you can imagine, they are not happy if they can only spin up like 5 or 10 VMs. So they want to spin up 100 or 200 or 500 of them within a very short time. And they have SLAs that they need to fulfill. Interesting enough, what I learned now, since I'm a part of the Microsoft sales team every once in a while, that the sales team already organizes that for the large customers. So they do not need to submit a support ticket. So the sales team automatically increases those values when it comes to, for example, using API calls, the limits that are included if you are using API calls, because whenever you're using the management console, you are firing up API calls. And if there's a limit, then suddenly you may click on a button and nothing happens and you don't know why. You just hit the limit, and so the system does not respond anymore. And you have to wait until you have another 24 hours where you can use your resources. Now, if you modify that ahead of time, then you're in a much better shape. But this means that you need to talk to the Microsoft folks, like the sales team, like the support team, and the technical solution professionals. So they will be able to help you with that. But you need to know that these limits exist.
Yeah. Also, sometimes, let me give you an example on the AWS side. So there's a region called AWS London, but that AWS London region doesn't have GPUs at all. Or there's a region in South America, there are no GPUs. So what if you're a global company and you want to run something in like South America, or you want to run something in Africa, or even in Asia? So sometimes the regions and the instance types in these regions, or the amount of instance type in that region can be limiting as well. And if you ask vendor XYZ, they're not always easy to share these kind of details. That's what I see myself in the field. Alrighty.
Or in that case, they may not know either. They may, like you say, there's limited resources, so they may look at the data center in Johannesburg and say, "Oh yeah, there's GPU there," and so they may not know. It depends on the resource you ask as well. And these aren't small companies. What's that?
Any questions? Any additional questions, or shall we move to closing remarks? What do you think?
What I see is
any questions in the chat.
Yeah,
I know that's what I'm looking for. There are several questions. We haven't figured out actually how for all of us to view these questions. We're going to go through them after the show. We can go and address some of these things individually. Okay. Tobias though asked how many Germans it takes to change a light bulb.
The German asked how many German are required to change a light bulb. Okay.
Well, that's what he said. The answer is one. We are efficient and don't have humor.
He's from Austria.
Austria.
Alrighty. Hey, let's see. Let's go to closing remarks. Is that okay?
Yeah.
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 So let's see. Where shall I start? Maybe start with first like big thanks. And stay on. I want to share a little bit more about just thanks. But first, thanks to Eric, to Gabe, and like the TeamRGE friends, TeamRGE community friends for making this happen. Thanks for all the listeners and colleagues, partners, friends, competitors who are listening in right now, like live or later.
And thanks PQR for providing all the resources here.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So big thanks. Gabe and I, we spent time with Steve Greenberg and many other community friends it's called an EUC Masters Retreat, like some weeks ago. And the Masters Retreat is also a community event. And one of the topics, it's like an unconference, which means there's no agenda up front, and we create an agenda on the fly. Tech topics, non-tech topics, personal development, like all kinds of things. It's really a great event. And one of the topics, I think Perrine, Gabe, and myself, we added that topic to the list, is like personal branding and personal development. And Gabe will share a little bit like background later, but I want to share also something small on my end. So what I really like and great to see is that let's see how I make it simple. What I like is to see former colleagues, community friends stepping up, creating their own communities, changing jobs, just building their own career. And I know for sure many people have sweaty hands, not because it's warm right now in Netherlands, maybe a little bit, but also sweaty hands because it's just new and new territory for them. And that reminds me to myself, like some years ago, where this was not like not something common to present and to expose yourself, and is not my natural habitat, to be honest. Gabe made a comment like that. That's just like you're an IT guy.
Right.
Mostly,
that's most of us.
Exactly, most of us. So that's a relief. But yeah, that's me as well. Some people think, well, this is all easy going for Ruben or Benny, but it's not. It's not like that. It's like hard work. That makes sense, but it's still sometimes really uncomfortable. And by doing it becomes more comfortable. And it's great. That's what I would like to highlight. Great to see that people step out of their comfort zone and join a team like TeamRGE or build a new team like GoUC.
Or just start a blog or
submit
a session to a conference.
Right? Exactly, these kind of things. And that's great to see. And if you're listening right now, like live or later, and you're not sure, like, hey, what can I do? Just reach out to community members, like including myself, and I'm happy to share my story more one-on-one. Happy to mentor where I can to help you to become part of a community, and that's what I would like to share in the closing remarks.
I think everything you said is super important, Ruben, and I share. We ventured out when we were independent, and now we're kind of aligned with vendors and stuff, and that means that we need more independent voices out there that are holding, people like you and I now accountable for the things that we say and for the things that we develop, and so that's what we want to see with groups like this. That's why the Steve's EUC Masters Retreat was really cool to attend, because there was a lot of people there, a lot of people with really excellent thoughts, and it was a very small event, and it was so casual that people felt comfortable sharing those opinions and just having little conversations about that. And I think that's good for getting people to open up. But and like you, I would also like to, offer up services just to help people, even if it's reading blog posts before you publish them, or helping with a presentation that you might want to submit for an event like this. Let me put it this way. When I was 18 years old, probably like a lot of people here, instead of going out on Friday night, was trying to get like a NetWare server working, or something like that, to learn how all this stuff worked. And my parents wondered why I wasn't going out, but I knew what I was doing. I wanted to be, this when I grew up. And I think a lot of people are like that, where they'd rather be with their fingers on a keyboard and not out speaking in public, waving their hands around. And like Ruben and like I'm saying, we've kind of come through that same path, and we're willing to help anybody that also feels like they might want to try that. There's this thing out there called imposter's syndrome. It has a Wikipedia page and everything. It's basically when I have this, when I get on stage and I'm 99% sure that everybody else in the room is smarter than me and is about to find out that I don't know a single thing about what I'm talking about. That has a name, and it's pretty funny when you bring this up to people and give it a name. A lot of people say, "Oh, I have that too." And so part of getting past that is identifying that that's a thing, and we're here to help anybody that thinks that they want to get past that and actually, put new information out there, contribute stuff to a community like this. We're here to help you guys and girls, and so if we can do that, we are more than happy to do so.
Yep, good.
Yeah, just to make a final remark about what you just said. Alex Cooper, who is the organizer of E2EVC, he had a great idea at the E2E event in Berlin, because at the night out, he asked people who had never presented to stand up, take a microphone, and for 5 minutes introduce themselves to the crowd after they had a good meal and they had a couple of drinks. And he said, if you do that, if you have the balls to just get up and do that, then you are a great candidate to be a future E2E speaker. And guess what? 3 people, they were standing in front of the crowd. We were in a restaurant, and they took a microphone and they introduced themselves and they explained what they do. So some of their expertise. And it was very, very interesting to see the reaction of the audience. Like, these people just said what they're doing in their ordinary work life. And suddenly there was somebody who said, oh, wow, this is interesting. I want to learn more about that. And that was exactly like a breakthrough moment, I hope, for all 3 of them, so that they will be future speakers.
Good, good. Well,
Yep,
let's
I
wrap
hope
it
so
up.
too. And you're right. The only way to learn is by doing. And so even if you're scared of failing on stage, I'm the kind of person that learns through failure, which can be expensive when using hardware. Um, but I always take something positive away from that. And so, my first session I ever did, I prepared 12 hours for a 1 hour session. I practiced that 12 times. And so I gave it was amazing. And the next time I thought, cool, I got this. And I walked up and bombed. And it's because I didn't know how much preparation I needed. But the only way I was going to get that feedback was by not having a great presentation. And so now I can, I use that information as feedback to help become a better presenter. And so you have to take the good with the bad, but ultimately, if you learn from both of those experiences, you can be very successful. And it
Yep.
just takes experience.
That's
The bottom line.
Final quote, and some of my colleagues and community friends know, like a big quote attached to me is just do it. So when you see the Nike ad, or like a guy or gal with a Nike t-shirt with like just do it, that is also me. Sometimes you just need to do it. Step in, and yeah, that's uncomfortable, sweaty hands, whatever it is, just do it. And I know from my own experience that it will be great. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but at the end, he will benefit. If it's community effort, personal life, business life, sometimes just do it and make it happen.
Yeah.
Hey, for those of you who are still online, and because now we're getting closer to the end, it would be great if you're able to give us feedback or what you liked, what we did today, if you want to have any changes. So this time we introduced bio breaks. That was very new because last time we didn't have that. It was 7 hours straight without a break. This time we had breaks. Now the question is, did we have too many breaks, or do we still need more, or
Were they
longer,
too
or
long?
shorter?
Yeah.
I actually like the 20-minute sessions because it keeps people sharp and focused on one or two topics. So if you like that format, just give us the feedback so that we can improve when we do it next time.
Yep.
Okay?
Hey, do we want to upload videos and content?
Yeah, what we want to do is we want to upload the video content ideally to YouTube. So we need to check the recordings and then, cut them into pieces and then publish the individual videos, because this is how we want to get the exposure out there. If you want to have the content, so get in touch with the speakers, because everybody had his or her email on the deck. And so get in touch with the speaker if you can have the PowerPoints or any of the material. This is how we should do it.
Yep, sounds good.
And
Alrighty.
once again, too, thank you to Eric at Zen Blog, because this is a community event, and so we everybody donated their time and energy to this, and so it's super helpful that Eric was able to donate his platform so that we were able to put this on. That literally would not have happened without him. So thank you very much, Eric.
No problem. So I have in terms of what you're saying, stepping out of the comfort zone. So by running the Virtual Expo for so many years, you won't believe how many of those people did present at the Virtual Expo for the first time, and many of them are now CTPs. And one of the example was Dennis Spahn. He here with us today, and he presented on the Virtual Expo first time doing a presentation on a webinar. And now when he went to TeamRGE, he entered a standing room only, and it was also streamed on Citrix TV. So just has to have a
wow, that's fantastic.
Exactly. So
that's good stuff.
These are great events to do that at, because if you're scared of an audience, right? If that's what makes you nervous, then there's no audience staring back at you while you're presenting here. And eventually you might get to the point where I actually find these a little bit strange to present at because there isn't an audience, but I definitely wasn't like that when I first started.
Yep.
So, and we plan on doing these regularly, and between this and between Virtual Expo, and there's a lot of opportunities to do these kinds of presentations.
Good. Well, let's would say close the session and have a great day or
rest of the day.
Yeah, safe trip back home.
Thank you everyone for attending. Good night.
Exactly.
Good evening. All right. Thanks everybody.
That's good.
Thank you everyone.
Bye, guys.
And And as mentioned, this was recorded, and all the questions and Q&A will be sent to all the presenters afterwards, so they will be able to follow up with blog posts and so on to answer your questions that didn't get answered during this full day event. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. See ya.